I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for the introduction, Jason. It's always a pleasure. All right, so let me. Well, I'm assuming everybody can see my slides. So I want to just go ahead and start. So the topic that I wanted to discuss about was really, strategies for modernizing applications, and certainly, talk a little bit about the cross-platform and issues and things like that. Also, a little bit about myself. So I'm actually the CEO co-founder of NUMECENT. Actually, they started the company about 10 years ago. It was in stealth for a while, and then we launched out back in 2012. And yeah, and I'm going to be happy to share with you kind of my views about application virtualizations and what I think you guys should be looking at. So with regards to NUMECENT, one of the key use cases that we have is that people like to use us to get some of the older applications onto the newer frameworks, and really at the very high level look at trying to eliminate migration as a whole. But before we go too far into that, what's interesting are some of the numbers, right, that you see when you talk about Win32, which Microsoft would probably consider legacy at this point. Maybe some of you as well. Um, a lot of people still today use Win32 applications, right? So as much as SaaS has moved on, as much as we have these newer cloud technologies, what's important is that you kind of keep some of these older applications not just up to date but also relevant today, because what people don't understand is that a lot of these applications integrate into the back office workflows and things like that, right? And also too, quite frankly, there are some software applications that work perfectly well. So people want to just they bought perpetual license and want to continue using it. Why not continue using that? And this is one of the fundamental reasons why things like COBOL still exist today. And not to say that Windows applications will be the next COBOL, but I guess I am really saying that. And you got to take this thing seriously, because at the end of the day, trying to not every migration plan has worked out very well, especially trying to move to, let's say, a cloud infrastructure. So if you can basically kind of sweat some of these assets you already have, I mean, I think it's not a bad strategy, right? We certainly work with a lot of partners that will keep, let's say, older versions of databases, ERP systems alive. And so as long as they continue doing that, it's not just a great cost savings, right, over the long term, but also it helps to have people to retrain all those things, right? That makes actually transitioning from one tool to another somewhat expensive. If you can avoid that, that's always not a bad strategy as well. Also, too, the that 30% and 35% number is actually based on enterprises that are over 10,000 users, and typically those applications in those enterprises range from like 500 to 1,000. So that's quite a few Windows applications that are out there, if you look at it that way. And also, too, another big number: 80% of those applications are going to run past 2025. Again, this is quoting from a very large analyst, and that also suggests that, hey, these things are here to stay. But also, to the last number, I guess you want to keep in focus on is this 70%. Obviously, hey, I have to mention COVID, like everybody has. But this will be the last time I mention it. But what's interesting is if you look at WVD, you look at Citrix, it's supposed to be the last presentation, you'll see that there's huge amounts of growth, and the reason behind that is that the application delivery, the modernization now is have effectively accelerated, mainly because this work from home, being able to be anywhere, has really increased, right, due to the pandemic. So anyhow, so that's a little bit about that. So let me just quickly kind of go into the story in terms of where NUMECENT is and how it sees application delivery and provisioning. So really, what you see here is that this problem has been around for a very long time, right? So if you're old enough like I am to kind of see what's evolved, and we basically on the left had an era where there was no real great network connectivity, right? And there was certainly no internet, and everything was kind of basically based on delivering things classically through the OS, and you see this natural progression that happens, right? So as we kind of go down the timeline, as I mentioned, Citrix, has introduced really kind of an X server, right, Unix concept, to Windows applications, providing that portability, security, better maintainability. So you have different approaches on how people have evolved these things, but also too, you kind of see what's happened as we introduce SCCM and then AppV. This is now where the internet starts to come into play, right, and how that affects, right, the application delivery, and containment and things like that. Also, too, as we move down along the line, app layering, right? So continuing kind of the OS central focus on delivering applications, being able to have the administrator control what gets delivered and things like that are kind of gets extended, right, as things grow to scale. But also too, with the iPhone, with quite honestly users getting more savvy, you're now starting to see a divergence in terms of what the end users are, who the end users are. They're becoming much more savvy. They're more power users, right? And from that standpoint, you're starting to see demands, right, of basically kind of the pushing the IT aside. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and get things done. So this, of course, 5-10 years ago, you started to see a lot more control of the end users demanding and expecting more. And of course, the App Store, right, has had a huge influence. And you can kind of see, as we now head towards today, Microsoft, you could argue, is kind of catching up, compared to where, let's say, Google, Android, and certainly Apple is in having, something that's much more, let's just say, user centric, right? So how do we, right, from the NUNECENT standpoint, how do we kind of continue to bring, your, Windows environment into that new world, right? How do you modernize it? And certainly, right, there's different approaches, and certainly what we want to do is make it very easy for you all to get there and have the satisfying, right, experience for your end users, because you are actually a service, right, to the organization. So, for all the key things that I talked about in the technologies, there are actually very many ways that you can solve the application delivery space. In some cases, combinations of ways. So even though you might have a WVD solution, you might have a Citrix solution, or very good workspace, Amazon workspaces, you might have part of it solved, but you still need to maintain those applications. And that's what NUNECENT has always been focused on, is this idea that, hey, there's other technologies that you use for delivering the apps too, but we solve a particular area of these apps where, how do you kind of, basically take it through its life cycle, right? Keep it running up to date. In the face of a new OS update, how do you keep going? And so a little bit about the company. So really, the what we want to do is take those applications, right, and make it as basically as portable as possible. We don't want you to have to package the application, 15, 20 different times, right, just because you have a different environment or a different image or a different tool running with it. We want you ultimately to just have one application and then deliver it to everybody, right, in your organization, not independent of what kind of work environment they're in, independent of what system they might be running in. It might be a Citrix environment over here. It might be a desktop environment over there. It might be a desktop as a service environment. It might be WVD. We really want to make the IT administrators' lives a lot easier whenever an update happens, whenever an old application is there, right? How can I go ahead and move things over? Fortunately, our staff is, we have a great staff. They have experience all the way from Windows 98 to Server 2019 in terms of getting these applications running, knowing how Microsoft evolved the APIs, knowing how they evolved the file system. And we've worked very hard in making sure that these apps move over and keep Windows alive and well. Also, too, not many people know we have 56 patents that basically surround all of this idea about the mobilization aspects, which I'll be talking about in just a minute. And a lot of people come to us because we have a lot of the IP and the technology, and we are also the technology behind a lot of the products that are out there that basically does the delivery. So just a quick scenario. So how do I look at the desktop, the Windows? Why is it so hard? Why isn't everything as easy as having an iPhone? Well, it comes down to this, right? A Windows application, right? Windows is a very powerful environment for your users. They have a lot of applications, but the key thing is that they all integrate deeply, right? Not just deeply with the OS, but deeply with other applications. And they all tie together to basically kind of bring a solution. So if you're like a software engineer like me, right? So you realize that in order to basically deploy a solution like this, and if they're tied together, you have to test things as a whole, right? You have to make sure that all the pieces are working. Now, what makes this really hard now is that, of course, as you remember, with that history, the internet comes in. Now things are updating real time. People want self-service. Things are changing constantly on that desktop. And as soon as you have one change, right, you have the potential of breaking things. And as soon as an update hits, and as you know, right, even the Windows OS itself, right, Patch Tuesday, all those things, you have to think about, right, is this going to create a problem? And if you think about all these apps now that are all connected, that are basically, if they're not self-healing, then basically providing more features, add things on, then you have to worry about, your users, basically doing something that could create a problem, right? And nightmare, right, for you in the support desk. And also too, right, as I mentioned, this idea of whenever you take an application or desktop and move it to somewhere else, you have the OS now to deal with. And despite the fact that Windows 10 is allegedly the last desktop OS that Microsoft is going to build, as you know, with the updates, that's not really true. Anytime that there's an update, right, there could be new features, there could be something APIs deprecated. We've seen that. I'm sure you guys have all experienced something going wrong after an update. It is just not going to stop, unfortunately. But again, it's one of the reasons why Windows is so well adopted. The reason why people continue to use it, because of that flexibility, and the configuration aspects of the OS, right, makes it a powerful tool, right, to basically service your users. And of course, as I mentioned, is basically as you go ahead and have these updates, or you have different configurations, or you have applications that don't like to sit next to each other, people start to build, different images, right, or different environments for each of these things. And then you start having, even within a similar environment like VDI, you can have, different images, right, for different users, things like that. Again, we want to eliminate those things and then just make it, a non-issue. So perhaps, if you guys have experienced some of this, if you have different Java versions, right, for that some of these applications depend on, or whether it's the IE and things like that, a lot of people, right, kind of witness these things, right, and it's always a big pain. So, as I mentioned, we want to go ahead and make cloud paging so that one application can be delivered to all of your environments. And we do it using basically two key technologies. One is the cloud paging piece. What cloud paging does is we basically install these applications in the cloud effectively. And what NUNECENT does is that we have the cloud paging technology to figure out which of those applications is actually required to run, and just delivers what's necessary to run. This is a very important piece because, when we start getting into, with layering, delivering these large applications, if you can reduce the payload size, right, reduce to 5-10% of the actual size of the application, you can have a ton of applications available for you, and then have it, basically bind and run instantly, real time. And that is not an easy thing to do. As every time you have an application, right, it basically kind of creates more and more state on the image. Anytime it updates, right, you potentially have to read, QA the entire image, and you can do that a lot less. You can just focus on the application and make sure that it's up to date. So if you can imagine taking that application, what fits into the physical memory, so let's say they're going to run Word, that's 80 megabytes in the physical memory, just bring that down, onto, your WVD session, for example, and run it. You're going to have a much faster, a much better experience, right? Go ahead and delivering those things. And also from a software asset management standpoint, really kind of comply, making sure that, those software assets aren't actually in the image too, from a software compliance standpoint. Also, the container piece is the big piece that helps make these applications. We actually go ahead and we re-implement, the entire file system. We also do a good job re-implementing parts of the registry. And you can argue that what we've done is that we've kind of made the OS a lot more compatible than, let's say, the later versions of Windows with your old software. And we do this because what we're trying to do, just like in a classic app V, a lot of app V, basically customers like to come to us, to basically as the next step in terms of how do I handle these applications. But they like to use our container because basically it runs, not only have the benefits of the sandbox, having the application basically will go ahead, run, and what looks like a familiar environment, no matter where it's running, and that's how you basically avoid the conflicts and then the issues. Then you have something that can, that basically can kind of move over, right, without having much involvement. Now, the key difference though is that is how we virtualize and how far down we go. We can do device drivers. We can do a lot of complex applications that actually simplifies the packaging process, that makes it a lot easier to go ahead and onboard applications. And in fact, we've went ahead and invested into additional tools to help automate all of those things, right? So that the end users, when it comes time to going ahead and getting all these large Windows real estate apps, right, and then getting onto whatever new environment you need to, then you have to do very little changes. But again, that having our own file system driver, not just basically a filter driver, right? This kind of gives a much higher compatibility rate than what you would normally see in the industry. Also, too, the isolated capability, that's kind of very similar to AppV. We provide that capability too. If you want to run it completely isolated to make sure that there's no conflicts with other applications, you can do that. But also too, again, the bigger piece of it is that when we deploy our applications, it does look like it's natively installed. It looks like it's there. It's fully running. But we sandbox it. We actually make sure that we know what other applications might be affected. You can control, let's say what antivirus can even access the application, so that way you can make sure that there isn't any bad side effects. Control, what version of a plugin can run against what version of Office, and you can change those policies dynamically per user. And that's the key thing. If you needed to remediate, right, you don't have to remediate and have it affect everybody. You can remediate on a per session, per user basis. And that makes the environment much more scalable. And again, you kind of need that, if you really want to kind of go towards this other vision that a lot of people have and has started with, some of the classic technologies of having the self-service portal. So I just went ahead and quickly talked about the use cases. So typically, if you have an application, it only takes one app, right? One application. It's a plugin in Office, right? That isn't running your latest version of Office, or you need to run an old version of Office. Because it ties into some back office system or some CAD program that ties into the CNC machine. That's still there for the last 30 years. You want to make sure that all of these things move over, because at the end of the day, you still need to update things from the security standpoint, also from a feature standpoint too, if you need to take them. So we've got the app compat piece, and then that is part of the modernization story, helping you bring towards more of the self-service model. But also, if you do that very, very quickly and rapidly, then you can get more into the boldness, compliance, and security, right? If you can go into a non-persistent desktop mode, right, and then use Cloud Page those applications, real time, make them more compatible in a non-persistent environment. That can really kind of start driving what is more of a stateless system, which is going to give you, less of the Windows rot, right? All of those issues and headaches that we got. Also, too, from a software asset management standpoint, hey, if the applications aren't there, right, if you simplify your image, right, you're going to have a much better experience, right? And then, not just from a technical standpoint, but again, from a compliance standpoint. Again, from a compatibility, we handle things way back. So in Studio, you can take really old applications, right? In the player, we continue to update. So as long as you update the player, what we try to do is make sure that you don't have to go ahead and update, right, the packages. So the old packages continue to run on the latest system. We take care of making sure that things are contained, runs right within the environment, and runs on the latest platform. So that way you can be compliant from security standpoint and things like that. Also, we offer both a cloud and on-premise version. A cloud, of course, simplifies, and certainly if you're going to look at using, either the Citrix, managed service provider offerings, or even the Microsoft's, right, the WVD, you can have everything, subscription based with our system, and of course, not have to deal with the server. And again, the benefits are like with the packaging I mentioned, you can basically bring this thing back. But the other piece of it too that people don't understand is that, when you go ahead and deploy, you have that ability to revoke things, right? Even the things with drivers and things like that. And if you have that ability to do that, then what you can really do is maintain that clean, right, base image all the time. And then of course be able to remediate, because end users, right, the best thing you want to do is if they have a problem with a particular version, you want the ability for them to be able to choose a rollback and not have to give your IT or call the IT, right, to figure out, well, how do I uninstall this thing and get this where my desktop's dead. As I mentioned, we have power. It's all about DevOps now, right? Making sure that you can automate everything. We can automate anything that you see from a user interface standpoint. All of that, right? You can control not just from the player, but even on the back end, even in our packaging. We actually have command lines that will help automate things. So if you want to go ahead and you've got a lot of in-house applications that you want to automate and deliver to your users, right, and they're constantly being patched. All of that, again, cloud paging, PowerShell commands, makes life great. Hey, it's the new world, isn't it? Also, you can configure the apps, as I mentioned. We're extremely scalable. Let's go ahead and skip some of this stuff. You can also configure cloud paging into various kinds of Office environments. We're really focused on high availability. We want to make sure that we don't have ever an outage using our software, right? And you can go ahead and give more of the 5 nines, right? If you go ahead and make sure that, hey, there's always a place to fall back to, whether it's just even off to your file system, or fall back over to the internet. So we have an architecture, right, that makes sure that you have high availability, and on top of that, an internal cache on your system, right, that will actually page from it to make sure that even if you've completely disconnected, you're on an airplane, you can still keep running those applications. And then finally, as we kind of get to who uses cloud paging, a lot of great use cases. One is I had an XP application off a bank. They got hacked. We were the only technology that was able to move them off and then running onto Windows 10, of course, the later operating systems. But also, too, we just onboarded, it's not written up here, but a very large financial institution. They actually used our product and actually made terminal server RDS, what do you want to call it today, the multi-session component, and then have more applications run on that, which is a great benefit because, if you're ever looking at going into the WV, going into, multi-session environments, you need to make sure that, hey, those applications are compatible, right? Because those are the lower cost ones to run things. But, don't, take my word, we have great, CDPs. We have a lot of experts, that have, tested our product. It's great compatibility. Gartner, again, has listed us in 2020 as one of the things, but we're written up on all of the major analysts. And of course, we now have 1.4 million users that use our software today. So if there's any safety in numbers, that kind of proves that. But so to conclude, really, if there's anything to remember about NUNECENT 1, hey, it only takes one application, right, to go ahead and make a nightmare of things. But really, if you believe that, things will continue to update, if you believe that there's going to be constant changes in Windows, and hopefully I convinced you of that, then, then you're going to need ways to making sure that, you have a technology, have a container that'll basically mitigate those issues, right, that you can control. And you can control, per session, right, actively, dynamically, if there's ever a problem. We provide that. And whether you look at migration as basically moving from Windows 10 onto, the Citrix platform or the WVD platform, hosted platforms, it is going to continue. It is not really ever going to end because whether we have, hopefully not another pandemic, I'm sorry I mentioned that, but hopefully another big issue come up, you don't want to be in a situation where, you're stuck having to really kind of spend, months going on this project and moving things over. Finally, the compatibility piece, we're the best in the business. We can help make those old applications that you couldn't think that could run on a new environment, SaaS, or have to move to a SaaS platform. You'd be surprised on what you can move over. And then lastly, right, the agility piece. Hey, we need to not just take, the new applications, make them agile, make your backend more efficient, but more importantly, hey, take those old applications too, put a nice, cloud patient container veneer on it. Hey, it's good as new again. You'll get another good 10 years out plus out of those applications. You'll look like a hero. That is it. So thank you very much. Really appreciate, your time. Thank you for listening.
Well, Art, that was a great presentation, sir. We really appreciate you taking the time today. So what we're going to do first, we're going to go ahead and start our polling. So we're going to go ahead and open up our poll here, and then we've got a couple of questions and answers that we'll kind of go through here. So we'll give that a moment here while folks go ahead and answer that poll. Go ahead and get over to the Q&A here. So one of the questions here, first off and foremost, is one of the things is one of the questions is we didn't hear talking much about IE8. Can NUNECENT package Internet Explorer 8? I mean that seems like a topic that a lot of folks who are still supporting that really would like to know.
Yeah, and full disclosure, right? There's of course the license issues that are surround that, but yes, I mean so NUNECENT can package IE8 onto the various environments, and we certainly know a lot of people that use our technology to do that. What's interesting is that are some of these legacy ERP systems, for example. They rely on clients, and not just IE, but ActiveX and those kinds of things as well. So it's not just virtualizing the browser, but it's those plugins too, right? That you have to make sure will continue to run right on a supported OS. So yes, we do handle that, and of course the later versions of IE as well.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here. Looks like we've got everybody came in here, so I'll go ahead and close that. One of the other question here is this: is a lot of organizations, they've already got existing investments in other tools to deliver applications, right? And how we get those packages out. What are some of the strengths of your application? How do they integrate with some of those other existing solutions? One of the big ones today is CCM. How does that play and how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So a few things. So one is that because of the PowerShell and even before PowerShell, we've had APIs for all aspects of systems. Right. This is one of the reasons why a lot of other companies like to use our technology or embed our technology in it. is that you can completely customize, everything. So going back into the questions. Sorry, Jason, it was basically the
Yeah, so how does it integrate with other app packaging, provisioning
sorry.
tools and systems, right?
Yeah, so basically what we have is the PowerShell tools can go ahead and like, let's say, for example, one of our customers have an AppV app store that they built out. So using PowerShell, you can go ahead and still delivering what looks like AppV and then integrate cloud paging in and fold it in that way. So that's one strategy that you can go ahead and use and preserve. Not have to change the work environment, but basically be able to go ahead and update the applications, right, or your existing investment that you did, and then just insert cloud paging, right, almost like a shim into those environments. With regards to SCCM, what we've done for that is that you can go ahead and deploy SCCM just with us, just like another application. Except what we've done is the containers wraps those legacy applications or even the new applications in it. Then what you automatically get is that as soon as you deliver it, you can now, SCCM has taken those applications. You can actually have SCCM take the content and deliver that as well too. So we're not involved in the transport as well. And then on top of that, because with cloud paging, you can connect it with our server, and then from a DRM standpoint, decide, hey, I need to revoke this application or I need to pull it back. We have an integration both into not only into SCCM, but also just through our server framework, be able to control those apps once they're delivered through SCCM. So we can also handle that situation as well.
Excellent, Art, and we really appreciate that. So, and if y'all have any other questions, please post them into the chat. We'll make sure that we follow up those with the NUNECENT team. And really wanted to say thank you, Art, for your time. It really was a great presentation today, and really looking forward to having future discussions with the product. So, our next raffle is going to be the